Today, America turns 250 years old. 250 years since 13 colonies declared that all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights. It took the country nearly 2 centuries to mean it. This is the story of the man who made America answer for that gap. Not with weapons. Not with riots. With something harder to defeat, discipline. A Baptist preacher, 26 years old, thrust into a leadership role he never asked for, standing at the center of a movement that the machinery of an entire government was mobilized to destroy. He would be arrested nearly 30 times. Wiretapped by his own government. Called a threat to national security by the man running the FBI. Sent letters urging him to take his own life. And 4 years after he stood before the nation and described a dream, he would be shot dead on a motel balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. But between those 2 moments, something happened that no amount of surveillance, sabotage, or violence could undo. The laws of the United States changed. Not by accident. By design. This is the story of Martin Luther King Jr., and the machinery he had to outthink to make a country built on liberty actually deliver it. If they did, you can too. Let's go back. December 1955. Montgomery, Alabama. A 26-year-old pastor named Martin Luther King Jr. has been in town for just over a year. He has a young family, a fresh doctorate, and a congregation at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. He is not a national figure. He is not even the most senior minister in Montgomery. Then Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat on a city bus, and the black community of Montgomery makes a decision that will change the course of American history. They will not ride the buses. Not for a day. Not for a week. For as long as it takes. They need someone to lead the new organization coordinating the boycott. They choose King, partly because he is talented, and partly because he is new enough in town that the local power structure hasn't figured out how to target him yet. He says yes. He has no idea what he has just agreed to. Within weeks, his house is bombed while his wife and infant daughter are inside. He is arrested on a trumped-up traffic charge as intimidation. The city tries economic strangulation, pressuring insurance companies to cancel coverage on the boycott's carpool vehicles. This is the pattern that will define the next 13 years. It is never just one fight. It is legal harassment, economic retaliation, and physical violence, deployed simultaneously, against a movement with no army, no budget to speak of, and no legal protection guaranteed to work. And there is a fourth front, one the public will not learn about for years. The federal government itself is watching. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, will come to view King not as a civil rights leader but as a national security threat, and will build a surveillance operation against him that includes wiretaps on his home, his church, and his hotel rooms. Understand the scale of what King is up against. Segregation is not an attitude. It is law, federal, state, and municipal law, built and reinforced over generations, with police departments, courts, and in some cases the FBI itself aligned to preserve it. Conventional wisdom in 1955 says none of this changes in King's lifetime. Southern segregation had survived Reconstruction, survived 2 world wars, survived every previous legal challenge. The system was built to outlast anyone who challenged it. The Montgomery Bus Boycott lasts 381 days. It ends only after the Supreme Court rules Alabama's bus segregation laws unconstitutional. It is a win. But it is also a warning of exactly how long, and how costly, this fight will be. Before we go further, if this story is landing the way it landed for me the first time I really sat with it, hit subscribe. Every week, we bring you another account of how ordinary people forced impossible change against a system built to prevent it. If they did, you can too. Now let's talk about what King actually built to fight back. Atlanta, Birmingham, Selma, 1957 through 1965. King and a small group of allies formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, a coalition of black churches turned into an organizing machine. Their method is nonviolent direct action. Not passive suffering. A deliberate strategy. Provoke a response from an unjust system in full public view, and let the country watch what segregation actually requires to enforce itself. This is not one man's charisma. It is a method, refined through repeated failure. Albany, Georgia, 1961 and 1962. A campaign that largely fails, because local police refuse to give the movement the dramatic, visible confrontation that forces national attention. King and his allies study that failure carefully. Birmingham, 1963. They choose it specifically because the local police commissioner, Bull Connor, is known for exactly the kind of brutal, visible response Albany lacked. It works, in the most painful way possible. Images of police dogs and fire hoses turned on children move public opinion in a way years of argument had not. Inside the movement, the strain is constant. Young activists in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee grow frustrated with King's caution and his instinct for negotiation over confrontation. There are real, documented splits over strategy, not manufactured unity, but genuine disagreement about how fast and how far to push. And there's the FBI. Hoover authorizes wiretaps on King's phones and hotel rooms, formally justified as a hunt for communist influence in the civil rights movement, but expanding into a campaign aimed at discrediting King personally. In 1964, the Bureau sends King an anonymous letter, later confirmed to have come from the FBI, that some historians read as encouraging him to take his own life. This was not fringe conspiracy. It is documented in Senate investigation records decades later. King is arrested repeatedly. He spends time in the Birmingham jail, where he writes what becomes one of the defining texts of the movement, a response to local clergy who had urged him to slow down, to wait for a more convenient season. He does not wait. Then, in March 1965, comes the moment that nearly breaks the movement and ultimately defines it. Marchers attempting to walk from Selma to Montgomery are attacked by state troopers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It becomes known as Bloody Sunday. It is broadcast on national television. The setback is brutal. Dozens injured, the march stopped before it starts. But the footage does something the movement had been trying to achieve for a decade. It makes the violence undeniable, in real time, to a national audience that could no longer look away. King has to decide, in the days after, whether to press forward with a second attempt, knowing exactly what waits on the other side of that bridge. He presses forward. 8 days after Bloody Sunday, President Lyndon Johnson addresses a joint session of Congress. He calls for a Voting Rights Act, and at its emotional peak, reaches for words borrowed directly from the movement's own anthem, "We Shall Overcome." On March 21, 1965, protection secured by federal troops, King leads thousands of marchers out of Selma. 4 days and 54 miles later, they reach the steps of the Alabama state capitol in Montgomery, 25,000 strong by the time they arrive. On August 6, 1965, President Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act into law. The results are not symbolic. They are structural. Before the act, systematic barriers, literacy tests, poll taxes, outright intimidation, had kept black voter registration in parts of the Deep South at a small fraction of the eligible population. In Dallas County, Alabama, Selma's home county, barely 2 to 5% of eligible black residents were registered. Statewide, it was under a quarter. Within a few years of the act's passage, black voter registration across the South rose dramatically. Alabama climbed past 50%. Mississippi went from roughly 1 in 15 registered to nearly 2 out of 3. Let me say what that actually means. This was not an improvement to an existing system. It was the dismantling of a machine that had been engineered, state by state, for nearly a century, specifically to prevent black citizens from voting at all. The Civil Rights Act had already outlawed segregation in public accommodations the year before, in 1964. Together, the two laws did something the Emancipation Proclamation and 3 constitutional amendments had not fully accomplished in the previous 100 years. They gave federal teeth to the promise made in 1776. Pause the video for a second. Think about this. What's the thing you know needs to change, that everyone around you says isn't worth the fight? Drop a comment. Because sometimes the fight that looks unwinnable is just waiting for the right pressure, applied in the right place, in full public view. Now, let's talk about what this means for you. So what do we actually learn from King's 13 years, from Montgomery to Memphis? Lesson 1. Moral clarity survives surveillance. The FBI wiretapped his home, his hotel rooms, his church. They tried to blackmail him into silence. He kept working in public, on the record, under his own name. If you're facing pressure to go quiet about something you know is right, the discipline to stay visible is itself a form of strength. Lesson 2. Coalitions are built across disagreement, not despite it. King's alliance with SNCC's younger activists was genuinely strained. Different generations, different tolerances for risk, real arguments about tactics. The movement did not succeed because everyone agreed. It succeeded because people who disagreed kept working the same direction anyway. Lesson 3. Discipline is the strategy, not a mood. Nonviolent direct action was not passivity. It was a deliberate method, tested and refined after failures like Albany, designed to make injustice visible to people who had the power to end it. Discipline under provocation was the entire mechanism. Lesson 4. Being early costs you before it vindicates you. King spent years being called reckless, too fast, too slow, a troublemaker, a communist sympathizer, depending on who was criticizing him that week. History settled the argument. He did not get to see how it settled. Here's the challenge. Montgomery took 381 days before the courts ruled. Birmingham took a decade of failed campaigns before Albany's lessons made it work. Selma took one brutal, bloody defeat before the Second March succeeded. They kept going. You're facing something right now that feels too slow, too costly, or too unwinnable to keep fighting for. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a project nobody believes in yet. Maybe it's a truth you're tired of repeating to people who won't listen. Maybe it's just showing up again after the last attempt didn't work. Here's what the record shows. The people who changed this country did not win because the fight got easier. They won because they didn't stop when it was hardest. Don't let your answer to something that matters die in a drawer. This is the history Disruptors. 250 years ago, 13 colonies declared that all people are created equal. It was an aspiration, not yet a fact. Martin Luther King Jr. spent 13 years, and ultimately his life, closing the gap between what America said it was and what it actually did. He was surveilled by his own government. He was jailed nearly 30 times. He watched a movement nearly break apart from the inside. He kept going anyway. And less than 2 years after Selma, the law of the United States had permanently changed. On April 4, 1968, he was assassinated on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 39 years old. They called it too fast. They called it too slow. They called it dangerous. He did it anyway. If they did, you can, too.